Well, greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us from different parts of the world. I'm here today with Dr. Janet Salmons, and we have been doing a lot of activities together, sharing what we know. And it's always been a great joy for me to collaborate with Dr. Janet. She is somebody who is so brilliant, so much experience with qualitative research, and yet she is so humble, and that is always amazing to me. And so I'm going to introduce her, and immediately we're going to go into this discussion where she'll be talking about the conducting qualitative research online. I know I co-authored a chapter on this, but trust me, the whole chapter we cited Dr. Salmons a lot because she is the guru as far as online qualitative research is concerned. If you have a question, please post it in on Facebook right there where you are watching this from. And those who are going to watch the recording, obviously, we will try to entertain that within the Qualitative Research Connect Facebook group. If you don't mind introducing yourself, where you're joining us from, that will be very nice. It's always good to see where people are introducing themselves and where they are joining from, and I will try to see that as we go through the interview. So without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Salmons. She is an independent scholar, a qualitative research methodologist, and the research community manager for SAGE Method Space. Some of you may know already this, but she runs this huge platform where a lot of resources are being shared. And I remember several months ago, we were having another conversation, and she was telling me that there were so many people who were checking this method space from the Philippines. And I said, I think it's because we have been talking about that in the Philippines. we should probably talk about that method space and how it works, the resources that we have there. It's full of resources, videos and articles and blogs. And I mean, she will tell you. And this is the person, this is the brain, the big brain that is behind that. A lot of free resources there if you really want to continue learning qualitative research. She's the author of 12 books about online research, collaboration, and teaching and learning. Her most recent publications are doing qualitative research online. What else? Of course, that's her life. And I having used her books in writing, co-authoring our chapter, I can tell you her books are fully packed with practical, well, very good theory, but also a lot of practical strategies. So if you are interested in conducting research online, please just Google her name. You'll find all the different articles and the books that she has written on that. She will be a research fellow at the Center for Advanced Internet Studies in Bochum, Germany in 2024. So next year, if you want to talk to her, she will be joining us from Germany at that time. So thank you so much, Dr. Janet Salmons, for being with us this morning here in the US, but afternoon in Europe and Africa, and evening in Asia and most parts of Asia. We are going to talk about how to conduct research, qualitative research specifically online. This, I think, has become even more important today now that COVID-19 really opened this thing. I know when you started writing on conducting qualitative research online, it probably was not, many people didn't think too much about that. It was kind of optional. But when COVID-19 hit, that was basically the only way to conduct qualitative research, because most people around the world were in lockdowns. So let's start with the very first question. What are the advantages of conducting qualitative research online?
Well, thank you for inviting me, and hello to everyone from around the world. I'm talking to you from Boulder, Colorado. And with the miracle of these technologies, we have this chance to reach across the globe. And that was my initial motivation to try using this kind of video conference technology for interviews, because in my doctoral research, I knew that I wanted to talk with people around the world, and I did not have the funds to travel around the world and go find them face to face. I think there are a couple of big advantages, and certainly one size does not fit all, and no one approach is going to be the right thing for every study. However, I mean, to begin with, I just want to say I don't need to convince you that qualitative research has advantages, because in this world of massive quantities of data, massive quantities of information, and in some ways a very kind of fragmented society across the globe, where on one hand we're connected, but on the other hand we're all far apart. The in-depth kinds of stories that we can create from qualitative research to help people understand the real experience that people are having of whatever problem we're studying. One of the things that was very interesting to me in the last year, through Method Space, as you mentioned, I do a lot of interviews, so it's fun to now be interviewed. But talking with people in data science and in computational social science who say, well, one of the most important parts of that kind of research is the inclusion of the qualitative side. So even when we are using those kinds of big data, data sets, etc., we need to still go deeper and say, well, so what's it mean to actual people, and why do they respond the way they do? So one of the advantages is being able to reach beyond our own geographic area. And I want to say, even though we may think a lot about qualitative research with human participants, the same is true if we're looking at extant data. So, there are a lot of advantages to being able to access archives and different kinds of repositories, whether we're looking at contemporary data, the, social media and comments and posts and online communities, and that sort of extant data. There's also a huge move to digitize historic materials that we now have access to. We may need to get permission in order to access some of those private databases, but way back in the paper era, I had to actually travel to libraries and archives when I was doing an archival a study that involved archival correspondence. And certainly there are still materials that are not digitized, and there's a whole kind of equity and inclusion side to that. What kinds of historical materials merit the funds that it takes to digitize them. So there are it's not a perfect world in that regard, but still there are many advantages that we have today that allow us to really reach in a broad way.
Thank you so much. You have definitely shared a lot of good ideas there, and you have drawn our attention to different sources of data. Actually, as far as online qualitative research is concerned, it makes it really much more accessible. It makes a lot of data accessible today, because a lot of data is really digitized. Something that I would say 10 years ago was not like that. Now there's a lot of data that we have online, and I wanted to jump on that, but I don't want to jump ahead of things. We'll get to that. But as we can see, we have a lot more opportunity when we conducting quality research online than the I want to call it traditional face-to-face thing, because we can access data without having to travel far away. We can conduct interviews in our house without going too far. Yes, we're going to go to the ethical aspect, but not yet, because that is something that that comes with this online quality research. But let's go to another question here. What should we consider when we are planning, in the planning process, to conduct qualitative research online? What are some of the things that we must make sure we keep in mind?
Well, the first thing is to approach your design in a kind of holistic and iterative way, because as you think through the different parts of the design process, and certainly with any good qualitative research design, you need to show that all of the pieces are aligned, but they're aligned in a somewhat different way when we introduce technology. So if we think about, creating a coherent plan that takes into account the purpose of the study, the methodology and methods of the study, the population, and the technology. So you notice that I put the technology last, because I suggest that you really think through what the purpose of the study, the problem that you're looking at, the unit of analysis. Are you interested in individuals, teams, families, communities, organizations, or the big society as a whole? And so then as you're thinking through how you want to collect data, and so let's talk more particularly about the kind that involves human participants, because that ties in with some of the other questions we're going to talk about. So someone might say, I would hear someone say, oh, well, I'm going to conduct interviews on a platform like we're on right now. That's a video conference platform. So they start with that rather than starting with, well, what is it that who are the people you're trying to reach? So if I'm thinking, just as an example, of using a platform like we're on right now, then I have to say, well, are the people I'm interested in interviewing, do they have access to this kind of broadband technology that allows us to see each other talk, perhaps share slides and images, so that we can do kinds of elicitation techniques and creative techniques? Do they have the tools? Do they have the digital skills to do that? Is it okay with me if I exclude the people who don't have that? Will I be okay to have some interviews that perhaps are more low tech, that are only text and don't have these other forms? Am I capturing observations in addition to just simply the words? Am I planning to just transcribe the whole thing into a text transcript that I'm going to analyze just the words? Or am I looking at, so if you look at the two of us, you can see right now, well, this is my actual office. And whereas Safari has a virtual background. Is that okay with you? Do you want to see their settings? What are you looking at? Are you looking at my nonverbal expressions? My, when I get, I'm perplexed, I've got emotion, tears come to your eyes, are you observing those kinds of things? Are you looking at what's in my setting, the books on my bookshelves? I know when I see the reporters who are in their home office, I'm like, looking up, like, what are the books on their bookshelves? So, because those all tie in with your design, those all have methodological implications. And they also have implications for your agreement with your participants. So rather than starting with the technology, start with, what is it that you want to gain from this interaction, whether it's an interview, a focus group, or even a participant observation, or some other kind of experience online. And how does that tie in with, some of these other questions about access and about the kind of data you're going to collect? In a platform like this, I can collect oral, visual, text, or only transcribe the words, in which case, it doesn't matter whether the person turns the camera off, whether they have a camera, etc.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this, the importance of trustworthiness. And that's, I think, combining all this into, synthesizing all this into one word is trustworthiness, so that when we're conducting qualitative research online, we need to make sure we are upholding the trustworthiness of the study. And I like how you said it, that the platform, the online tools that we're using, they're simply tools, and that's why they come last. We need to plan first, design properly our study, and then use the technology to facilitate our data collection. We do not do things the other way around. Just like many times when I give training, people just want to know how do you analyze data with the computers before we even know how to design and conduct qualitative research. No, that is a tool that we'll talk about later on. Let's understand, first of all, how to do it right methodologically. And then after we have done that, let's go to the technology and see how that is done. Let's go to another question. This is a lot of good information you're sharing here. By the way, for those who have joined, thank you so much. I see you joining from different parts there. Thank you. And if you have not mentioned where you're joining us from, please do that. I've shared the method space on Facebook there, so you can click on that link and see all the resources that we're talking about. Let's go to another question, and that is the question of ethics. I think this is a thorny topic. How do we deal with ethics, specifically online? What are some of the things that we need to watch for and make sure we do it properly online? We're not going to address too much of the face-to-face, but specifically online.
Well, there are a lot of ethical dilemmas that we need to take into account. That's why, when I updated doing qualitative research online for the most recent edition, I actually added another chapter. There are 4 chapters about ethics. So one of the points that I want to make is that, we talk in research about having, so if we're asking people questions, then we need to get consent. It's a little bit stickier when we're talking about collecting extant data. There are other kinds of agreements or permissions that may be needed, and we may need consent. We have to evaluate that depending on the nature of the study and the kinds of data we're collecting. But if we're working with human participants, then we must have their consent. So, many people, think about that as being, whatever their institution or the funding mechanism for the study requires is some kind of a formal document. It may be, a legal kind of document that they are required to sign. I say in qualitative online research, informed consent, don't think of that as being a pain in the neck. This is your opportunity to establish with your potential participants the expectations for the study that will allow you to collect the data that you want. It's also the time to begin developing trust and rapport. Now, back when I taught and worked with doctoral students, and they would think they worked very hard at crafting the questions they wanted to ask, just as we did with our interaction today, and they just think, well, the person's going to log in and just, answer these questions, and I'll collect my data, like problem solved. And I'm like, maybe not. You need to think about every step of your process as being an opportunity to build trust, credibility, rapport, and mutual respect. So, we could talk all day about, ways to do that online, but attention to that is essential if you're going to be able to collect, some meaningful, deep, responses from your participants to me, that's a big part of ethics is building that mutual respect. And that's just not something that in general is going to happen overnight. It depends on also the sensitivity of the topic you're discussing. If you're going to discuss a sensitive topic, you need to spend a little time, to lead up to an actual interview. And throughout every one of those interactions, you are, the way that you present yourself, the way that you communicate is a part of that process. The other thing that I think is essential to consider online, and it is more so every day, and that is the privacy of the data and the protection of data. It's, really challenging because let's face it, the reason that these technology companies, have a lot more money than we do is that they figured out how to take, every piece of data they can collect and make money on it, and it's like, well, there's nothing we can do about that, but we don't want that happening to the data we're collecting for an online study. So, we really need to evaluate the tools that we want to use to make sure that we have the ability to keep that data private, so that we can then analyze it and make sure everything is anonymized before it goes out. So that means, like, no, we're not going to dump raw data into an AI tool where you put it in, you can't get it back, it went somewhere, but it's not, you can't say you protect it. Now, with video conference platforms, they all operate differently. Look at, the tools that you're considering, and you notice that I generally don't discuss things in terms of brand name because different brands are used around the world. And I want you to think about the features, the characteristics, and then decide on the tool rather than just, picking one, out of, because it's the one you're used to using for your social life. For example, one of the, simple things that I suggest is, rather than recording to, if you're doing something like this, where there's a recording involved, rather than recording to the cloud or to the server owned by the company that runs the platform, record it to your own hard drive. And then there, and to ensure that, and you have to ask, it's not, these platforms are generally not designed for research. So you have to ask, well, if I record this to my own computer, my own hard drive, does that leave a record in the cloud or not? And each platform operates differently, and some do not give you the option to make that choice, in which case that would not be a suitable platform to use.
Thank you so much for this classification of the ethics that we have to deal with. It's not just the face-to-face. We have to make sure we meet the standard of the qualitative research ethics in general, but also make sure that the technology we're using, we are following the ethical principles on that. And I'm glad you brought this idea of recording. In my university, at our university, we really have a lot of strict rules as far as using Zoom or these platforms is concerned. Because if you record on these platforms, obviously the company has access to your recordings.
Right.
And right there, you have lost the confidentiality.
Right.
It's not that, it's not that they will most likely use that data, but there is that possibility that you do not have access. And I'm glad that you brought that strategy of using the local recording. What I did when I was using last year and earlier this year, I was conducting a massive qualitative research study in the Philippines. And I think some of them, my participants are listening right now. And what I did for those who needed to use the Zoom because I couldn't access them, I recorded locally on my computer and on my iPhone so that nothing was saved on Zoom, because it is my ethical duty to protect them, even though we're not talking about something that is, even if it is revealed, it's not something that will cause any harm to people, but I still wanted to protect my participants. So this is very important when we're conducting qualitative research online. Let's not just jump on the tools and think that, okay, now that we have the tools and my participant knows how to do it, I'm good. We need to look at the ethics of that. How can I make sure that I'm not breaking the confidentiality and the privacy standards that are there for online. Okay, let's jump to something else. And I'm still monitoring here. I haven't seen the questions yet, so we'll continue looking here. If you have a question, please put it there. Another question you have already mentioned a few tools, a few online qualitative research tools, but I want to go further. How important are online platforms in qualitative research?
So, keep in mind that platforms are not neutral. And for the most part, we're using platforms that were not designed with research in mind. They're designed for commerce and social interactions, which have very different needs than we have for research. So I think, again, evaluating the features that you're looking for and, kind of tying that into your design. Are you trying to, elicit responses? Are you, to what extent are you including observation? But there's another characteristic to think about when considering the platforms and the tools that you want to use, and that is the degree of synchronicity versus asynchronous interactions. Now, for in a situation like we're in, we can see that you can tell because you're looking at me, that I'm not doing something else. I'm just here with you, and that's kind of the agreement that we would have made as a part of the informed consent process. Is the informed part of the informed consent process. We would have said, okay, we're going to make time for this interaction, and that's the only thing we're doing. But maybe you're talking with someone who has, small children, or they are, in a work environment or something, and they can't necessarily be uninterrupted. Well, you have to decide, well, just to what extent is that okay? How much of their undivided attention do you need? And, how do you set that up? But, as much as, this kind of interaction is fantastic because, we can have a natural conversation. We can have a semi-structured or an unstructured interview. So today we're having what we might call a semi-structured interview. We have questions that we agreed on in advance, but there may be follow-ups, prompts, other questions that may come. So it's semi-structured. But if we could have an unstructured conversation where you could just say, tell me what you think about online research, and just, might go in all kinds of directions. But we might also, maybe it's not convenient to have a synchronous, or maybe we're talking about a topic where we really want the participants to take some time and reflect on the questions, to think about them, maybe even to gather some examples, or to take photographs like in a photo voice style. So then, the real-time interaction like this is perhaps not the most appropriate. I was talking with someone recently, it was a person with disabilities, who said, I need time to think about, this is not, it's not comfortable for me to just have somebody ask me a question and answer. I need time. Let me have some time. So then, if that's the kind of style that we have, or perhaps that's a stage of the study where we want that, we might use email, which would be where we need to agree on the, how much time is okay. I would like to hear back from you within 24 hours, within 2 days, what's the time frame? How long will this interview go? Is it going to go for 2 weeks? Is it going to go for a month? How long is this going to go on, this exchange? Or maybe we use something like text messaging where, we have kind of an elongated conversation because I'm, prompting you today, look at the ways people in your workplace, interact when, in a casual way. I'm kind of giving you some things. Okay, go look for this today. How are you feeling about whatever the problem is I'm studying today? And so then, we're having this kind of back and forth, over a period of time, but it's not necessarily, they're not online the exact instant that you've posted the prompt, and the whole purpose is to give them time to think about it. So again, one size doesn't fit all. It depends on all of those factors about the population, the problem you're studying, and the ways that you want to interact with participants. So then, finding the right tools that will work. Again, it may be that, especially since, we have a global audience here, one of the things you have to decide is, is it okay if I use different tools with different people? Because, I might have somebody who says, the only thing I have is a mobile device and I can only do text messaging. I don't have the bandwidth. I don't have the power to use some of these other kinds of tools. Is that okay? Then I'm going to, when I get this, there's all sorts of, you can see, implications for the data analysis. If I've got text data with this person and visual data with that person, then how am I going to balance that out at the analytics stage? So I think, the tools and platforms are very, very important. And, I just say, look really carefully at the ones that you choose to make sure that they're suitable, not only for you, but for your participants.
Thank you so much for presenting all these different types of tools and different considerations that we have to keep in mind when we're conducting or planning to conduct a qualitative research study online. I had never thought about using texting messaging. I have never used that in qualitative research. I've used emails for people who wanted to use. Oh, let me say I have used it in a different way when I had a participant. I actually was earlier this year who prefers to communicate with Messenger, Facebook Messenger, and she didn't want to have a live interview. She said, "I want to organize my thoughts. Is it okay if I can type my answers and send them to you?" I said, "That's perfectly fine." And usually people will send this to me by email. But what I discovered, she just copied that from her laptop and put it in Messenger, and then sent it to me. And that's how I collected her data. And it was very well written. Everything was thoroughly done. She addressed all the questions. But as you were talking, I was thinking about the possibility of actually having a live asynchronous messaging, just like instead of talking to somebody, because some people are so fast. And allow me, for those who are joining from Asia, allow me to pick on you. I have never seen people who message faster than the Filipino people. I think they are the fastest as far as a message. I mean, they can write paragraphs and paragraphs within 2 minutes. Like, okay, I can, but it's very slow with this. So as you were sharing this, I mean, this is something that we can actually use.
Right. Because on one hand, it gives you a lot of flexibility and kind of to have that sort of live reporting, on the scene.
Yeah.
It, ties in with kind of a narrative methodology. It could tie into a diary method because it could be, so you can think of, even with text messaging, you can think of, well, what's the degree of synchronicity that you want? So it may be that you want to have, an actual, kind of the sequence of the whole interview with text messaging, or it may be that you want to do this over a period where you're kind of seeding prompts for them to think about and to respond. You want them to think about this today and respond later, or something where you're building in a little bit longer time with the response. But one of the points that I suggest, if you want to have an interview, as we're doing here, where it's a Q&A and we're on in a synchronous manner, consider really think carefully about your questions. So, in an interview like this, where it may be that you could ask me a large, broad question that maybe it's going to take me a little while, tell me about, your childhood, kind of, well, that could go on for a while, or, how did you survive the pandemic? There might have more than one story about that. But if I'm doing text messaging now, perhaps it would be fine if they were Filipinos, but, for most people, I mean, you would want to have, at least a semi-structured interview rather than an unstructured, because you want to look very carefully at your questions and break those big questions down into small questions so that you keep that dialogue going back and forth. Because what's the biggest risk with online interviews? I mean, with a face-to-face interview, we know part of ethics and voluntary participation is that the person can say, I've changed my mind. I've had enough. I don't want to go on. I don't want to talk about this anymore. I'm concluding this interview. Goodbye. But online, you don't have to be embarrassed. All you have to do is click the little X in the corner and they're gone. Or if you're trying to text message back and forth and while you're typing this very long question into it, the text box, they're off doing something else, and you've lost them. Yeah. So if I have a semi-structured where I can cut and paste those so that I can keep my side of it going and keep responding, then you have the chance to keep the person engaged. So some other considerations when you're using that kind of tool.
Thank you so much. It's nice. What you have highlighted here, what I'm hearing is, let's also ask the participant to see what their preferred means of online communication is. I was just reading a comment here from Tom Hogan, who said, I will say here in the Philippines, Messenger is almost 100% the preferred communication and correspondence method. And I want to let you know this, that in my early days in the Philippines, when I was working there, I was a little annoyed to receive formal communication through Messenger, because for me, Messenger was informal. But later on, I discovered that if I wanted to get anything done, I had to use Messenger, because I would send an email, which is, the traditional Western way of communicating. And people will spend 2 weeks without responding, not because they don't want to respond, but because communication is on Messenger, because Messenger doesn't take a whole lot of broadband. Everybody's there. You can communicate easier. Everybody checks their Messenger every day. Not everybody checks their email every day. Here in the United States, of course, if you are a faculty, you are expected to check your email every day. So I was using my perspective in a wrong context, and that created some friction in my communication until I embraced Messenger and everything was running smoothly. So let's not, as researchers, let's not impose a platform on people, because sometimes it may be a platform we are used to. Like for me, I love Zoom, and now our university is thinking about moving to Teams, and I'm like, okay, I've been using Zoom for like 7 years before COVID-19. I was already using Zoom. This is going to be something I have to transition to. But if that is what your participant is comfortable with, we need to try to accommodate their preference and not our preference. If what we need to use, for example, Zoom is the best option and it's something that they can learn easily, we may need to maybe send them a 2 minutes clip on how to operate that. But let's not just pretend like everybody knows everything that we know.
Because again, going back to the thought of kind of multiple interactions leading up to kind of, if you think like, say, your main interview, maybe if you want to use a tool like this, we might say, could we log in for 5 minutes to just so that I can show you some of the features we're going to use in the interview, so that you're sure that they have audio, they have video. If you wanted to use something like the shared whiteboard, shared applications, or you want to, let's say you're doing a photo voice kind of thing where the participant is going to share images that the photos they've taken, or something that they're need to use that capability. Have they done that before? Is that something that they need some coaching on? Another option that of course during the pandemic, when everyone was isolated, was not a possibility, but in other circumstances is a possibility, is maybe there is somewhere a community center, a library, or some other kind of an organization that let's say, for example, you're interviewing parents and the child care center cooperates with you, and they have a computer with broadband, and where you've got someone who is partnering with you. They set it up, and the participant just needs to come and sit down at the computer. It's already logged in, and just participate. They don't have to figure all those things out or have those tools themselves. So that's another option, depending on your circumstance, to look for partners who might be able to assist participants who maybe aren't accustomed to using these kinds of tools.
Let's go to another question. Thank you so much. We're headed to the end of the interview, and if you have any question, please post it there. And I want to acknowledge people coming from different parts of the Philippines here, and some of my friends. I won't mention the names, but colleagues who have published together with, or conducted research with, or have spoken at your university. Baguio, I see Baguio, Osamis, Puerto Princesa, Sultan Kudarat, and Cagayan de Oro. Yes, that's I see Leyte and different places there. And interestingly, I have somebody joining us from Colombia. This is the first time we have somebody joining from the country of Colombia. I want to welcome you in a very special way, because we have not had anybody joining from there. It will be interesting to know how you got to know about Qualitative Research Connect. Let's go to another question here, Dr. Salmons, and that has to do with online observations. I remember when I was writing our chapter on online connecting quality research online, when we got to the observation, it was the most challenging aspect. And so this time I'm going to learn from the guru, the expert. How do you conduct online observations? And I'm going to share with you an experience that I just had several months ago, how I did my online observations. But I want to learn from you first, and hopefully I'll get a few other things that I can use in the future in my own qualitative research.
Okay, well, again, there are lots of different kinds of opportunities, and here too, we have the question of just as we would in any other study. Is it a participant observation where you are a part of the group and you are interacting with people, or are you outside of the situation and watching? And so, there's a whole, ethical matter there, in terms of consent, etc. But we'll just, set that, aside for a moment. With any kind of good observation research, just as we might have an interview guide or interview questions, depending on the degree of structure, we want to have an observation guide. Going back to some of the things that I said when I was discussing the use of this kind of tool, what are you looking for? Are you looking for my emotional response? are you looking at my you can see that I talk with my hands. Are you looking for my nonverbal signals? Are you looking at characteristics in the setting? What is it that you want to know about me that you're going to learn from the observation part of it? So, if we're in conjunction with an interview, we want to define ahead of time, a little bit about what it is we're looking for, and probably to communicate that to the participants when we're informing them. But there are so many things that we can observe. Someone could be observing what we're doing right now. You could do an observation study using recorded materials from YouTube, from webinars and online events, just as you might attend physical events in a face-to-face study. We have so many opportunities to do observation that, where, again, depending on, the nature of what you're doing and the nature of, and whether the event is public, where, the people, if I'm giving a public webinar, then I'm assuming that, if someone's watching this and they want to quote me, or they want to, use some part of it, that, it's public, we've put it out there. Whereas if we're having a private one-to-one conversation, then, or you're in an organization's team meeting, or, something like that, then, we'll need to have some agreement or informed consent, depending on the nature of it.
Thank you for those different dimensions that are pertaining this topic. But I want to go to a question that is kind of follow up on what we are talking about here. And this comes from Cebu in the Philippines, from a colleague, Dr. Ariel Ramos, a colleague and a very good friend. He says, my worry with data gathering through text messaging or messenger, for example, is the possibility of being influenced by artificial intelligence. I might not be able to capture the authentic response. I'm not sure how artificial intelligence will influence the messaging when I'm messaging one with you. I don't know if you have something you want to talk about on that.
Well, this is, it's kind of a new twist, that we need to consider. When we're establishing the trustworthiness, of our participants, and let's face it, they're trying to establish our trustworthiness too. Are you a real researcher, or are you, somebody who is trying to, kind of take my data for with some other motive in mind? Can I trust you with, my personal stories and my experiences? So I would say, this becomes something that we need to, when we're doing written, I agree, whether it's text messaging or email, to say, I'm interested in your experience, please don't use, another tool to generate the text. I don't care about grammar. I don't care whether, your sentences are correct, or, any of that. I want to know how you feel, what you think, what your experience is, and, at least, establish that as an expectation. Then, the other thing that we can do is to triangulate the data. So again, if we've had multiple types of interaction with someone, I know, even though when I was teaching, we didn't have ChatGPT, thankfully, I have to say. Even so, plagiarism did not become invented with this tool. It was already just so easy to cut and paste. But, if you're interacting with the student, you're reading their writings over a period of time, and kind of like, suddenly they've become quite erudite. Like, how did that happen? Like in 2 weeks. Maybe this is not, they didn't write this. So if you, have first off trying to set your expectations that, please, I want your response, not a robot. But then also having multiple forms of data that we're collecting so that we can triangulate, and then, we might have to ask a follow-up question. Now, tell me a little bit more about this response. What was going on here? If it's something that you are concerned about based on the population that you're working with, a more synchronous interaction. I mean, like I say, if we're talking, you can see me, that I'm not, gathering this, from some other source, because you can see me, and that I'm not, I'm not doing something else. So if that's something that you're concerned about, some an approach that on the more synchronous end of the spectrum might reduce the risk of that. I have to say, I mean, on one hand, if we have to set our priorities, and we can't always get everything that we want. Now, I personally would not use Facebook Messenger because you can't protect the data. Right now, very recently in the US, there was a case, I mean, there are people who are now in jail, because things that they talked about on Facebook Messenger were turned over to the police, and, they're facing prison sentences, not for crimes of, for what they were doing. What they were talking about was not something that was legal in their state. They thought it was a private conversation between mother and daughter, but it was not private. So, you have a hard time protecting the data, but maybe you say, that's the risk I have to take because this is the only way that I can interact with someone. In which case, maybe I think, well, if there are very sensitive matters that I want to be absolutely sure I can protect, maybe I maybe I have to say, well, we're going to chat on Messenger about this, but can we also take even 15 minutes on a platform like this where we can talk about the more sensitive matters, or look for another channel that they might agree to that would allow you to protect the data. It's very difficult.
It is a complex thing. And I think you have presented a lot of different considerations that may be given here. And as you were explaining, now I understood exactly and why this was a concern. I didn't think about it that you can ask a question and people will just ask ChatGPT to answer that, and then they copy and paste there. Come on, I mean, that is, but I see, Dr. Ramos, I see the possibility of this.
Right.
And
I don't think we can't ignore that as a possibility.
Yeah.
And so that, this is why, I mean, going back to what I've said before, the informed part of informed consent is really essential when you're doing this kind of research. And, again, to think about that not as a burden, but as an opportunity to really clarify, I'm studying this topic because it's really important that we understand how people deal with whatever the topic is you're studying. I need to understand how someone in your situation faces this kind of circumstance, or how it has, how you perceive, this phenomenon. I'm really interested. I can go online and find all kinds of posts and stuff like that. I don't want that. I want to hear from you, because you have something valuable to share, and it will help other people understand. The findings of my study will be useful. So to be able to communicate that, in a time when, from the time that I began writing about this stuff to now, like, where, I mean, you buy a cup of coffee, it's like, there's a survey. How did how was your customer experience? And people are so used to these kind of casual types of things, to get the sense that, as a qualitative researcher, they don't know what that is, probably. and we maybe don't even want to use this sort of, I'm interested in your story, your personal story about this experience. If I wanted to know, what someone else had to say, I would use that. But no, I'm talking to you because you are important. What you've experienced, can make a difference. So, being able to communicate that and in getting the sense that, your authentic voice is, what I want to hear.
All right. We have only 4 minutes to go, Dr. Salmons, and I want you to start thinking about some exciting opportunities that are coming up, including your books and things like that. But let me read a comment here, and I will address one question that came up here, and then I'll give you the rest of the probably 2 minutes to wrap up with the opportunities that are coming up. I like what Thomas Hogan said here on Messenger. He said, the single answer or single questions make sense. Maybe deeper dive or extended sub-questions may be better suited for a Zoom call or Messenger video call. So I think what he meant here is that we may we may need to have several short questions that are going to push people to really dig within themselves, so that they are not, things that if you had to copy and paste from ChatGPT, it's not going to make any sense. Somebody else had asked a question here: can we use quantitative research as a triangulation method for qualitative research? That's a general qualitative research question. The answer is yes, especially when you're dealing with things like case study. Case study is very good to use. You can add that. But you have to really design it like that and explain why it was necessary, because some people will do that because they feel like qualitative research data is not enough. No, qualitative research, qualitative data can be enough by itself, but there may be a specific reason why you want to collect quantitative data. Case study and grounded theory, those are things where you can actually collect quantitative data too as part of triangulation. We have 2 minutes. Talk about some of the exciting opportunities for more learning, starting with your book, and I see it right there on your right side.
Yes. Well, one thing I'd like to mention is I gave you the discount code. There is a discount code, and I hope that if it does not work in your part of the world, I'll give you my contact information. You can contact me if you have a problem with it. But if you have access to an academic library that has the database called Sage Research Methods, the first edition of the book is in there. The cases and online interview research is in there. There are several of my books that are in there that you can download chapter by chapter. If you have that database, that's a free way of accessing my materials. Method Space, as you mentioned, not only that we have lots and lots of ongoing new material all the time around qualitative and quantitative, every kind. It's a researcher to researcher community. And afterwards, I'll also give you the link. You can share. If you would like to contribute something to Method Space, I will welcome hearing from you. We have a series of webinars. We've just updated, kind of created a new series. We had previously a series called How to Get Published, and then I was doing the research ones, and we decided to join forces. So it's now How to Do Research and Get Published. And we have a free webinar every month. And they're quite substantive. They're panel discussions. They really go into practical detail. They're not just a talking head, somebody, using it as their, to just kind of have a diatribe about something. They're really practical. So those are some of the opportunities I would suggest.
Thank you so much, Dr. Salmons, for sharing all this expertise with us. We have come to the end of our conversation. And I want to thank each and everyone who joined us. And by the way, I had two other countries that showed up towards the end, Jamaica and Papua New Guinea. That again is the first time to see people joining from there. And interestingly, I happen to know these happen to be my friends. So and colleagues. So it is good that the joining from those two countries. I really, really appreciate each and every one. In the Philippines was the most represented country here. Thank you so much for coming, everyone, and keep thinking about these things. We have many other recordings that of the previous webinars. You can scroll down on this the Facebook group, and you'll be able to see a lot of engaging discussions that we have had from experts. Here we always have experts from qualitative research, and these are people you cannot easily get hold of. And so I consider it a great privilege and a great honor to have had you here. Dr. Janet, we wish you the very best as you continue really literally blessing the whole world, because people who go to method space, there are countries after countries after countries after countries. And so you are influencing the world with qualitative, methods, method space. And if you have never used that, I have shared that link there. I have shared the links that she shared with you. And if you want to buy some of her books, you have a discount there until December. I have shared that information on Facebook, on the Qualitative Research Connect Facebook group. So please go there and get hold of copies of this. I have a copy of this book and some other books that she has, and they are just fully packed with good information. You want to go wrong. All right, good night, Philippines. Good day, the US and Jamaica and Colombia, and good afternoon, Africa and Europe, for those who may be watching from there. I wish you everybody the very best. Bye-bye, everyone.